You are listening to the Financial Fitness audio subscription series, Month 10. This CD was selected to help you build your income, get out of debt, and prosper in any economy. We hope this information proves valuable in creating a better financial future.
Curtis Spolar authors a highly popular leadership blog, leads and mentors thousands of business leaders across North America, and speaks to thousands annually about leadership and success.
What I'm going to cover here over the next few minutes is I'm going to cover chapters 22 and 23 from the Financial Fitness book. Those of you guys that are saying, when I just pray that you hang on. Because talking about economics and money and stuff like that, sometimes it's not as fun, is it? How many of you guys like to spend money, though? Yeah. That's fun. So just remember, if you get better at this, you can spend more. How many of you guys like that idea? Yeah. All right. I want to preface this talk by telling you to please do whatever you got to do to get out of debt. Today is not a time to go out there and running off to the movies every chance you get, or taking your family to restaurants every chance you get, or buying big flat screen TVs down at the store. Now's the time to get yourself out of debt, tighten your belt a little bit, and put some money away, preferably in your own house.
Fired up.
And just kind of get ready. We're going to go through some interesting times here in the near future. We will eventually recover, and some will recover better than others based on how well you decide to play or learn and prepare. Okay? All right, now you all went from fired up to all sad now, didn't you? All right. I'm going to read a little bit out of this book, if I can get my glasses to adjust here on me a little bit. Okay, so the chapter 22, the fourth, I'm going to do some reading, and then I'm going to go through some diagrams and some examples of what's happening today in the world. I'll do a little more reading from there, and then I'll dive into some more examples. And by the time I'm done, I think this should make sense. Okay? And I'm a real simple guy. How many of you guys agree with me on that one? I'll just wait to see who raised their hand. A couple of you guys did too. It's like I purposely didn't look in your direction. All right. So the first three great economic questions in the book establish whether a nation will be based on freedom or force, who will be in charge, how those in charge will keep from abusing their power. These are very important foundations in any society. In fact, all of them are ultimately economic questions, because they deal with how to get the necessities of life and how to protect life, liberty, and property. That's important, isn't it? Especially for all you guys in Texas, right? Yeah. So the fourth economic question is, what will be used as currency? Once a society has determined that it will adopt free enterprise and maintain it with free government system, and once it has also established effective ways to keep the government from switching to a command economy and stealing the people's property and assets, a fourth great question arises. What will be used as currency? This choice has a drastic, lasting influence on a nation's success and on the individual financial fitness of its citizenry. The fourth great economic question is as important as the first three. But few people understand how essential it is, because most people don't quite get how money really works. How many of you guys heard before that we are taught to be the educated poor today?
Yes.
Okay, so we've seen like we're having more struggles today in our finances, more struggles in our marriage, more struggles just in relationships, kids with their parents. It just seems like things aren't, we're getting off track. And I was going to say a little bit, but quite a bit. Would you agree? Yeah. And we have results in our life today because of the actions that we do, because of the thinking that we have, because of the information that we take in. And it seems like the more we get messed up, the more the media and society says to do more of the same. And so we're headed for a cliff, and they think that stepping on the gas pedal is going to fix it. And what we need to do is we need to hit the brakes already. And we need to get in there and regroup and do a lot of changing in the thinking process. Okay? And so let's walk through the difference between currency and money, because I think that this right here, if we can get this part down, we can start to put together this in our mind on how it works. And so what is currency? Currency is a medium of exchange. It's a unit of account. It's portable, right? That means we can carry it in our pocket. That's important, isn't it? All right. It's durable, or at least somewhat durable, right? Some of you have some beat up dollar bills in your wallet, but it's somewhat durable. It's divisible, which means that a $10 bill in my pocket is as good as 10 $100 bills in yours, right? 10 $1 bills in yours. Thank you for catching me on that. See where my mind is going there. It's fungible, which means that it's interchangeable. My $1 is the same as your $1 in your pocket, not your $100 bill. Your $1 in your pocket, right? And so, what is money? And so money is all of those things plus. Now, this is important to understand. It's a store of value, which means it's stability. It's stable, right? It'll last a long period of time. And so it will last, which means that moths and bugs won't bug it, right? They won't get in there and chew it up. It means that it won't rust, right? It keeps its value, which is important. And the second thing that money is, that currency is not, is it keeps government and national banks from spending more than they have. Is this important? It's untamperability. It keeps people honest. I think that's important, isn't it? Especially with the government, because somewhere along the lines they forgot that the government is us, right? And so it's important to understand that money can be currency, but currency cannot always be money. There is a difference. And so we're used to calling the bills that are in our wallet money, aren't we? So understand it is not money, it is currency. And so let's walk through this a little bit more. I'll cover a little bit more in the book. So in chapter 23 is a brief history of gold. And it says, some people believe that gold was designed by God specifically to be used as money. Whether or not this is true, gold has a lot going for it. Gold is malleable and perishable, chemically inert, and extremely dense. It can be pounded into sheets as thin as 5 millionths of an inch. That is amazing. How can you measure 5 millionths of an inch? It says 1 ounce of gold can be pulled out as a wire 50 miles long. Dang, that's amazing. It's miraculous. This is just a miraculous metal. 1 ounce of gold can be pounded into 100 square feet. So what's that, 10 foot by 10 foot? 1 ounce of gold. That's amazing. And so let's go a little bit further through here. It says gold has been determined to be the best currency by nearly every civilization in history and has been highly valued for thousands of years. Author Addison Wiggins wrote, even people who are worlds apart in some ways can still agree in others. What did Karl Marx and Andrew Carnegie agree on? That gold is the only worthwhile money. It's amazing how two people have totally different views, but they come together on one. Why? Because it is what it is, isn't it? You can say, I believe this, but the results are it is what it is, isn't it? And they both realized, no matter what their views were, this wasn't going to change. And so, it says, throughout history, many types of currency were rejected in favor of gold. Cowrie shells, cows, wheat, giant stone discs, strings of beads, cauldrons and iron tripods, metal rings, copper, bronze, and even cocoa beans and whale's teeth, right? But a lot of these things didn't last, did they? They could rust, right? So none of them lasted. And so now let's shift gears into this thing that we call money or paper money that we're familiar with, or for a more accurate it's called fiat currency. All right, so let's walk through this a little bit. So paper money was invented to make it easier to transport wealth. Goldsmiths kept gold and they gave people receipts. Makes sense. You imagine carrying around a bunch of gold? Eventually it'd get heavy, wouldn't it? It just wasn't practical. Eventually people simply started trading the receipts themselves for goods and services. Well, that made sense. Instead of me going down and getting my gold and then coming back and giving it to you, I'll just give you some of my receipts and you can give me whatever I needed, right? So that's kind of taking a shortcut. Goldsmiths eventually began issuing more receipts than gold. That doesn't happen, does it? Can you imagine? Now, some of you guys came to the seminar today. Some of you guys drove a ways. I don't know. Maybe some of you guys had to fly here. Maybe you have a dog and you put it in a kennel overnight or something like that. Can you imagine that they said, and they gave you a receipt that they kept your dog? Can you imagine if they gave somebody else a receipt for your dog too? And now you only own a half a dog? That's just wrong, isn't it? That's illegal, isn't it? Well, you would think. They were able to get away with this as long as everyone did not command their gold all at once. So as long as one of you just showed up and asked for the dog and gave it back, and you did it at different times, I guess. If you both showed up at the same time, there'd be a problem, wouldn't there? This has led to something that we call today as fractional reserve banking. How many of you guys have heard that term, fractional reserve banking? Okay, we're going to get into all the details on that. Today, this is illegal and a commonplace for most nations. But all the times of great economic difficulties, there's been something which we call a run on the banks. Okay, that's not good for the people to print more receipts than they have gold, is it? Where everyone tries to withdraw their cash at the same time. And banks were forced to close down. Governments had even decreed something called bank holidays. Oh, we're going to have a holiday today. That means what? You don't get your money. All right. It's like, is the ATM machine on a holiday too? All right. And so hopefully they would wait out the panic. And in many cases, these banks never reopened and the people just simply lost their money. Should somebody be accountable for this? I guess my question is who should make him accountable? Isn't that amazing? We should, huh? I wonder why we don't. We're back to that term again, right? What was that term that I said earlier? Taught to be the educated poor. Maybe that's done by design. Let's move on. The term fiat currency derived from Latin. Word fiat means to let it be done, or it shall be. Doesn't that sound like something a big government would say? Because I said so. Right? It's backed by nothing but a promise. And so, fiat currency is used only because a government says so. Fiat currency is not backed by any precious metals or commodity and is only accepted by other people as long as they believe that it can be used to buy real goods and services. Through history, there have been numerous losses of wealth where people traded their products or worked for fiat money, currency, and then discovered that the others refused to accept it. That'd be a bummer. So you give me this, but it's worthless. I can't use it anymore. That would seem wrong, wouldn't it? Governments print fiat currency on purpose because they want to spend more, but have already used up their allotted funds. So they just print on some paper and they add their stamp to have approval and they spend it. And then when this happens, they're able to buy things at today's price. But as soon as they do this, the money inflates or the currency inflates, doesn't it? And so let's shift gears into that. And remember, we said before that it was backed by nothing more than a promise. I'm not sure if I said that to you or not, but it is. Well, now it's backed by future taxation because it doesn't exist and they got to get it from somebody. How many of you guys have heard that our kids will pay for it? Well, if you have the money in the bank, you're already paying for it right now. Your money in the bank is just starting to shrink. You just don't know it. All right, so we'll get into that more here in a second. It's by borrowing exponentially They're borrowing prosperity out of the future to spend it today. And then they skim money off the top. And then they raise minimum wage to hide the fact that they're stealing from the people. How many of you guys have heard this big debate over raising or not raising minimum wage? See, here's what happens. When they print more receipts than actual wealth, your currency in the bank starts to shrink. As it shrinks, it has less spending power. The value of it shrinks. It has less spending power. And so therefore, you start to feel things get a little tighter in your household. How many of you guys have felt some things get tighter over the last decade? It's gotten a little tighter, hasn't it? All right. So people are just saying, I'm just not making enough money at my job. I need a raise. How many of you guys are hearing that a lot nowadays? I demand a raise. That's a whole nother talk. I'm not going to get into that one right now. But here's what happens. If they keep increasing the wages, it hides the fact that why is money tight in the first place? See, if they didn't raise the incomes, then eventually the people would get so angry, they would say, who's doing this and how do I make them stop? But we understand the fall of the Roman Empire was bread and circus. That if you feed the people and entertain the people, you could take their freedom. And so we are living in one of the most entertaining times in history, aren't we? There's nothing really that people really need in the United States today, or in Canada as well. Babies are popping out of the womb with smartphones now, and they're upset because they're not the newest model. Let me get back to my notes. I'm getting off track. Here's what happens. Why do they do this? They do it because they have to pay for things like wars and social programs, and they have to buy votes. Did I say that? Darn it. And basically, they're lining their pockets. How many of you guys have heard of a guy by the name of Bob McEwen? All right, Bob McEwen, past congressman, and a couple decades back, and he uses an example of the different types of spending. The first party spending is when you're buying something for yourself and with your money. So if you're buying something for you and with your money, what are you concerned about? You're concerned about the cost because it's your money, and you're concerned about the quality because it's for you. The second type of spending is when you're buying something with your money for somebody else. Now, something changed a little bit, didn't it? What's important to you? The cost. And so as a kid, you buy your dad Old Spice, $5, and you say, there you go, Dad. It's the thought that counts. All right. The third party spending is when you're buying things and it's not for you and it's not with your money. Now, by definition, all government spending is third party money. And the example that Bob uses is he says, imagine that you have a workplace and all the employees show up late every day, or not all of them, but when they show up late, whoever does, they are charged $5. And at the end of the year, they have a big Christmas party, and they say, all right, we're going to take all the money. And they say, all right, Joe, why don't you head on down and grab a gift down there, and we'll give raffle tickets, and then we'll give it away at the break, and everybody will have a good laugh, and we'll have a good day. So Joe goes down to the store. He's looking through the storefront on his break, and he sees this 6-foot-tall green stuffed frog. $150, because that's what he's got. He's going, oh, this is going to be great. It's not his money. It's not for him, is it? They come back to the office. It's all wrapped up, big bow, whatever it is. They pull it out of the closet or whatever, and everybody has a good laugh, and Sue over here wins it, and that's great. You understand today why so much money is wasted is because they don't have skin in the game. And the people that have skin in the game are the educated poor. And they're not changing things because of the information they're taking in. But there's a fourth type of spending that Bob doesn't talk about. And it's when things are purchased for you and it's with somebody else's money. Today we live in a world where people have entitlement mentality. Where's mine? Somebody needs to help me with my kids. Somebody needs to do this. Somebody needs to pay my bills. Are you kidding me? That's as best as you can do? I want quality. I want quality education free, which how many of you guys know it's not free? Somebody's paying for it.
That's right.
Who's paying for it? Somebody that was born the same day in a crib next to you, they had a sign, I guess I'm paying for it. And the other person had a sign saying, I guess I'm getting it. Things aren't created out of thin air, and when they are, you find out they're really not. Okay? So let's walk through some more of this stuff. Currency supply has increased, and more in circulation trying to buy the same amount of goods. As a result, price rise and things cost more. With inflation, salaries and contracts usually remain the same. So most people get the same amount of income, but find that they can't buy nearly as much with it as they could before. How many of you guys have been to a fast food restaurant, I don't know, a few years back, and say, I'll take a number one. And they say, all right, that's $4.87. And now what's your dream building if a soda was only $4.87? That'll be $8.93. Really? It's like I go in there with one of my kids and it's $20. If individuals printed a value on a piece of paper and bought things with it, while the people who accepted it couldn't buy anything with it or could only buy less, they would be arrested for counterfeiting and fraud. This is precisely what happens when people write bad checks. This is exactly what most governments do. And it has caused numerous recessions and economic depressions throughout history. How many of you guys are kind of getting a bigger picture of what this stuff looks like and how it works? All right, we got more. I'm going to draw pictures up here. So let's talk about this thing called currency supply. And I'm going to use something called base currency. And what base currency is your paper dollars in existence. How much paper money, how much are actually floating around out there. Okay? And we're going to use an example for the U.S., but we can take this all over the world. The example still works. Well, in the U.S. history, it took the first 200 years to go from zero money currency, right, in existence to 825 billion of base currency. 825 billion in base currency. Well, let's talk about what's happened over the last few years. We'll go back to around 2007 till about now. We had the bailouts. Did the bailouts help? That sure raised a lot of base currency out there. As a matter of fact, it added 1.25 trillion. It was only at 825 billion. More than double, didn't it? For the bailouts. QE1 added another $1.85 trillion. QE2 another $2.5 trillion. QE3 another $4.5 trillion. QE4 another $4.5 trillion. And every month since, they've been adding more and more. Now let's draw a picture on what this really looks like. And so over here, we got this timeline. Here we go, and this goes a long ways. Well, here we are at 800 and some billion dollars for the first 200 years. And we're going to draw this even further. It hadn't even peaked out there. And we're going to say this is around 07, and we're going to say this is 2015. We're going to say it's the end of 2015 because this is what they're predicting. Their prediction is it's going to end up around $6 trillion base currency. So from here to here, it did this. Is that a lot of money that's been added or a lot of currency added out there? Now let's say, I wonder how much money that you've been able to save extra since 07. Keep in mind that the average person starts working at 16, they blink, 20 years go by, they're 36 and they can't go to the bank and pull out $1,000. What's really crazy is doing another 20 years knowing it don't work. They say, but I'm building a retirement. That's debatable. We're going to talk about that in a minute too. How many of you guys are hating me right now? So what does this mean? This means that if they're talking by the end of 2015 being around $6 trillion added. So it's actually going up even more. So imagine if you can take the currency and multiply it by whatever. We'll use a number like tenfold. What does that do with the receipts that are in your bank account? That's a whole lot of times they're splitting your dog into pieces, aren't they? You sure own less and less and less of that dog, right? And the same thing happens with your dollars. Okay? And so here's kind of how this works. The base currency, I'm going to draw this. This is a sponge, if you're wondering what this is. Sponge. How's that? All right, we'll draw some holes in it. There, it looked like a sponge? All right. And so what happens is there was a little pool of water right here, and then that sponge sucked it up. What the sponge is prices. And what the little pool of water is base currency. Now, guess what happens when they make the base currency bigger? What does that sponge do? It sucks up more of that water, doesn't it? All of a sudden, your sponge is looking like this. These are prices. Somebody's paying for it. There's nothing for free. Somebody's going to pay for it. And that somebody is us, right? This is a global phenomenon. And I know that some of you listening to this recording are listening from Canada. Canada's print even more. And this is happening all over the world. I heard there's a little place called Iceland that's rebelling. They had 6 billionaires in Iceland, and now, instead of having the bailouts, they said, we're going to make these guys pay for what they did. Iceland today has barely 1 billionaire now, and they're on their way to recovery. They made sure that the people that were doing the damage paid for what they did. They didn't make the people pay with their kids' future in their bank accounts and their retirements. This is happening in Australia. Russia, 18 times their base currency in the last little over a decade. Singapore, India, China, everywhere. And there is no example, none, of this turning out well. But you turn on the news, everything's amazing. Nobody's happy, but everything's amazing. And just when you think that you've hit rock bottom, somebody keeps digging. So I'm going to give you over the last 100 years a couple of examples of what happens when currency is printed more and more and it gets out of hand. Now, just so you know, in all the world's currency throughout history, if we were to go from all the currencies that started with A and all the currencies with B and C and all the way to Z, we would only get halfway through the B's and we'd already be at over 600 different currencies. And today, none of them exist. There's no example in history where this works. Okay? But in the peak of our arrogance, we think the US dollar will be the exception. So let's go through a little bit of history here. We'll talk about Taiwan back in 1949. It says this was a knock-on effect from China in the Chinese Civil War, where the new Taiwan dollar was issued in June of 1949. The monthly rate of inflation stood at 399%. Let's say 400% inflation every month. What is that doing for your bank account? How many of you guys think 400% is a pretty good little sock in the gut? How many of you guys thinking about pulling your money out and buying something that won't depreciate? So your mind started going, what do I do? Stop the bleeding. Argentina, in 1981, the highest denomination bill was the 1 million peso note. The peso was revalued 3 times. Brazil in 1994, inflation was 2,075% at its worst in 1994. This was just 20 years ago, guys. The real was adopted in 1994 and it would manage to calm inflation down. In Mexico in 1982, Mexico had a rate of inflation at 10,000%, due mainly to much social expenditures. How many of you guys think we have a lot of social expenditures? Poland in 1921. So prices rose by 251 times in comparisons to those in 1914. They doubled every 19.5 days. They introduced a different type of a currency in an attempt to start afresh, and inflation stood at 988,233%. I don't even know what that means. Greece in 1944. Prices started rising by 13,800% in October of 44, and they doubled every 4.3 days. Germany in 1923, Adolf Hitler rose to power as a consequence of hyperinflationary pressure, at least one of the reasons. Prices doubled every 3.7 days, and inflation stood at 29,500%. Yugoslavia in 1994, in just the 1 month in January of 94, inflation rose by 313 million%. Prices doubled every 34 hours, which is nothing compared to Hungary. The currency ended up getting revalued 5 times in all between 93 and 95. We're going to do a do-over. How many of you guys don't like do-overs when it's your money? That just means you all lose, right? All to no avail. The cause, a recent triggered by overseas borrowing and an ongoing political struggle in the 1980s and the following decade. Overseas borrowing. That doesn't happen, does it? Do you guys realize, when I was growing up, my dad used to talk about, he says, Kurt, there'll be a day where you'll have a wheelbarrow full of money and someone will come by and steal it. I said, they're going to steal my money? He said, no, they're going to dump the money out and steal your wheelbarrow. I don't even know what you're talking about, Pops. How many of you are starting to understand what my Pops was talking about now? And a good example of that is Zimbabwe in 2008. Prices doubled here every 24.7 hours in November of 2008. And inflation reached levels of 79 billion%. They had eventually stopped using the official currency and switched to the South African rand and the US dollar. A loaf of bread ended up costing $35 million. Hungary in 1946. They get worse. You notice they're getting worse? How many of you guys would like to take the 399% at the very beginning? That sock in the stomach seems pretty good about now, doesn't it? Hungary in 1946. Inflation at its peak reached a staggering figure of 13.6 quadrillion% per month. Quadrillion% per month? Who calculates this stuff? 46? I didn't have a computer in 46. I wasn't alive. That's 13, 600, 000,000,000,000%. Dang. The largest denomination bill was a $100 quadrillion note. Quadrillion note. Prices end up doubling every 15 hours. Don't put your money in the bank there, huh? Next day you take it out. What happened? Here's what's happening today. Let's draw this out a little bit. We're going through some interesting times, as we know. And I don't want to be doom and gloom because there's some good side to this. Do you guys remember hearing a lot of stories about the Great Depression? Do you guys realize not everybody was broke? There were some people that did pretty well. And the reason why they did well is that they got different information. Be careful where you get your information. It says 1 out of 1,000 are on the right side of the wealth transfer. Make sure your information is on the right side. the correct side. And so what's going on in our society today, it was growing like this until about '08. How many of you guys know things were doing pretty good till '08? And then what happened is spending started to slow, didn't it? And when spending starts to slow, because people are afraid, they start to drop money into society, right? How many of you guys heard the term helicopter drop? They're going to start dropping our base currency and making sure that there's more to stimulate the economy to try to get things going. But it's all fake, isn't it? All right. And so what happens, they do a helicopter drop, and eventually it just pulls out and it starts to take off. And things are doing great, as everybody says. How many of you guys are hearing real estate's doing good and all this stuff's doing good, right? Be careful. You heard Chris Brady's, I forget the name, it was a CD came out a few months back talking about the different bubbles. I think the title was something bubbles, wasn't it? 3 bubbles, that's it. And so here's where we're at now. So now they're talking about the threat of real deflation, and spending is stopping pretty soon here. And as it drops, it's going to take a major dive this time. But somewhere along the line, they're going to step in, and this is where hyperinflation comes in, and then things are going to get really out of control. And we're in some, you're on the front row. You get front seats of this show that's going to happen. Are you ready? Are you ready? It's going to be interesting. So let's go on. We're back to the book again. So the framers of the U.S. Constitution made it unconstitutional for the U.S. government to use fiat currency. They required all currency to be in gold and silver. But the government had found ways to break these principles for almost the last century in American history. How many of you guys feel like someone stole your country from you? It says, today, most modern governments print fiat currency, and the United States is unfortunately one of the leaders in this practice. How many of you guys heard of the term the middle class squeeze? So let's talk about that. The wealthy keep a little currency on hand, but put most of their savings into other things: gold, silver, precious jewels, land, real estate, business ownership, investments, and so on. When the government inflates a currency so it can spend more, these non-cash assets of the wealthy don't lose their value. But the money that the middle class have in the bank does. It's not worth nearly as much as it used to be. We talked about that, didn't we? So when society is saying, do this, put your money into this, right? And I'm not going to get into details, but we know for sure buying our own debt is not a good idea. You notice no one else wants our bonds, right? And so we're printing more money and we're having to buy our own debt. How do you do that? We have debt, so I'm printing money to buy our own debt. How does that even work? This is insanity, isn't it?
Yeah.
Why aren't they screaming this all over the TV? That's a good question for you. You might want to think about that one for a while. All right. So under such circumstances, it becomes more challenging for those in the middle class to pay their bills. While their pieces of colored paper lose their value, this is the system we follow today. But most people don't realize what is going on. They say the safest road to hell is a gradual one. Gentle slope, soft, underfoot, without sudden turning, and without milestones, without signposts. Right? It's happening. And you just have to know where we're at, is all I'm saying. And just remember, don't acquire more debt. Get out of debt. If you have to buy something, pay cash for it. Let's start tightening our belts and discipline ourselves a little bit. In some households, you got 2 people that love to spend. Go get help. Have somebody sit down with you and keep you accountable. It'll be worth it, right? All right. Let's go a little bit further. But it's not enough. Our government needs more. They want more? Where are they going to get more? I mean, what are we at? About $17 trillion in the U.S. alone. That's today. That's not counting for future debt that we're promised. I think that's over 200 trillion by the time we're done. But 17 trillion today. Well, I think there's about another $22 trillion in retirements and different accounts and stuff like that. Maybe we can borrow that. How many guys would like the government to borrow some of your money? Well, let's talk about this for a minute. This is an article I pulled. Anyways, in this article it goes on to talk about in March of 2009. We're just talking about the last 5 years. This is what's happening all over the world today. In the last 5 years, Ireland seized $4 billion from its pension reserve fund in order to rescue its banks. In November of 2010, the remaining savings of $2.5 billion was seized to support the bailouts in the rest of the country. In December of 2010, Hungary told its citizens that they could either remit their private pension money to the state or lose their state pension funds. But they still have to pay for it nonetheless. How many of you guys are feeling secure in your retirements? Some of you might be. Let me read some more. November of 10. The French Parliament decided to earmark $33 billion from the National Reserve Pension Fund, FRR, to reduce the short-term pension scheme deficit. In early January 2011, $60 million in private retirement funds were transferred to the state's pension scheme in Bulgaria. They wanted to transfer $300 million, but were denied on their first attempt. In the spring of 2013, Cyprus. How many of you guys heard of the little island of Cyprus? Exciting stuff, huh? They took a step further and they outright confiscated up to 50% of the funds from bank account holders in that country. Imagine coming in just taking half your money. In the fall of 2013, in Poland, government announced it would transfer to the state, otherwise known as confiscated, right? The bulk of assets owned by the country's private pension funds, many of them owned by such foreign firms. That's probably not good for business. In February 2014, the Italian banks were ordered by the Italian government to withhold 20% tax on all inbound wire transfers. The deductions were to be automatic. And it says, and then it would be up to the taxpayer to prove that the money is not in the nature of compensation. Prove it. The savings of all 500 million Europeans can be stolen by the European Union. Why? Because the financial crisis is not over. Do you realize when times get tough, they're going to get theirs? Someone says, well, that's not here. You're right. It's not here. In France, corporate tax is what, 75%? Can you imagine making $1.2 million, they give you $300,000 and they steal the other $900,000 of your money? You know, in California, between the federal and state, we're at 55% now. Some of you thought 75 was bad. We're at 55 right now. It's an indirect tax, right? It's easier for governments to do than to tax directly. In other words, we're going to take 55%, but the stuff that we just talked about fiat currencies, it's an indirect tax to make sure that they get the rest of it without you knowing. Is it important to know this stuff? Yes. Not to have all this doom and gloom, but to understand what's happening so you understand how to protect yourself. How about a solution? Yes. Some of you guys are ready for a solution, right? Convince your government to stop using fiat currency and implement the gold standard. Now, that's like a drug intervention. Oh my My goodness, these guys are crack addicts, man. You got to have more. We have to learn how to put the pressure on them. Always keep some cash and some savings in the bank. But I tell you, you might want to put some at home somewhere. Okay? And at some point, consider investing in things like precious metal. You know, put some food away, put some water away. Do not put your stuff in a safe deposit box. There's some off-site vaults and stuff that you can use. But I want you to study up on some investments in metals and other investments before you buy. Do your homework, okay? Take the time. Now, I want to also refer you back to Chris Brady's CD on As Good as Gold. The very first thing that you're doing is you're investing in what? You're putting the information in. The next thing you're doing is you're making sure you're getting out of debt and you're investing into the thing that's going to help you. Things like business and things that are going to help you take care of yourself. And then make sure you can start thinking about where to put your money later. I like what Claude Hamilton said. Author Claude Hamilton mentioned, he says that he had people talk about, well, I can help you turn your money into this. He says, I know how to make money. I don't need you to teach me how to make money. I just don't want you to lose mine. And so we have to do our homework, right? It says the more people ignore economics, the more their money and their wealth will be taken and the harder life will become. And so in closing, this is what we call the Noah principle, that you don't get any prizes for predicting rain, right? We only get prizes for building an ark. And you can whine all you want and say, well, I didn't know. But you can't anymore.
You have been listening to the Financial Fitness audio series. For more information, please go to lifeleadership.com. We hope this information proves valuable in creating a better financial future for you. No one can guarantee results, however, and the purpose of this audio is strictly educational. You should always seek professional advice for your specific financial situation.